Hi, my name is Moshe Crystal, and this video recaps my 3D sculpture of Odd Saint Nick, a crazy little Santa ornament that I designed. I started by sketching out a front view of my design in Photoshop, and used that as a guide to create a matching side view sketch. I drew some horizontal lines from key points on my front view sketch, and that helped to keep my side view sketch in sync with the front view. Then I imported the two images into Blender as reference images that I could use to guide my 3D sculpting. The front view image was placed behind my sculpture, and the side view image was placed off to the left. That way I could line things up with the reference images by toggling the viewport between the two perspectives. To avoid having to do too much sculpting work, I tried to start with base shapes that matched my reference images as closely as possible. I ended up using a combination of spheres, cubes, and cylinders, and scaling, extruding, subdividing, and distorting them as needed. I used spheres for things like the head, eyes, nose, ears, and hands. I used cylinders for the hat, cuffs, and limbs, and I used cubes for the belly, chest, feet, eyebrows, and that crazy lone tooth. While in theory I could have merged all of these pieces and sculpted them together, I left most pieces separate so that I could isolate and sculpt them more easily. That also made the texturing easier since I didn't have to divide most objects into sets of faces that required different textures. I used Blender's voxel remesher to divide the surfaces of the various objects to a more granular level to make them more sculptable. And I regularly ran the remesher whenever I wanted to change the resolution of the sculpting surfaces. I relied on a relatively small number of sculpting brushes. For adding and removing volume, I used the clay strips and inflate brushes. For adding detail, I used the draw sharp and crease brushes, and half the time I was just using the trusty smooth brush. After sculpting, there was the tedious work of adding seams to the surface topology to assist in the UV unwrapping process, which was required to add textures to the surfaces. Adding proper seams helped prevent my textures from stretching in certain places when they were added to the model. I find that Adobe's Substance Painter is better for texturing objects than Blender. So once all of the objects were UV unwrapped, I applied placeholder materials in Blender to make the model easier to import into Substance Painter. I saved my model as an FBX file and imported it into Substance Painter. There I applied textures for felt, metal, leather, and cloth, and did a little bit of custom painting on the sock. I decided late in the process to use Blender's hair particle system for the beard instead of sculpting it. So I had to use the lasso trim brush and the smooth brush to convert the solid beard shape to a chin. After quite a bit of fussing with the beard particles and adding some short fur to the various cuffs, it was finally time to render. I placed my model in front of a curved green backdrop, lit it with a 3-point lighting system, and rendered it using the Cycles engine. Here's another look at the result.